thanks so much for joining us. We're just going to wait a second for everybody to get connected to audio. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's event, which is a part of our Advice and Perspective series. My name is Lisa Famularo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a career coach here at UConn in the Center for Career Development. And I'm joined by my colleague today, who I'm going to let introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaliyah Castleberry. I'm also a career coach, and I focus on the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aaliyah. So just to give you all a little bit of context about today's event before we get started with our main featured content, today's event is part of the Advice and Perspective series, which is an opportunity for alumni of the University of to share their advice and share their stories with current UConn students as well as fellow alumni, also faculty and staff as well. And we're really excited that this summer we have a 5-series event planned for all of you. This is the second event in the series, and each of the programs this summer features a Black alum who is going to share their advice on navigating the workplace as a Black professional and what they maybe would like to have known when they were a student, or advice that they have for current students who are navigating similar successes and challenges. So that being said, we are really excited to kick things off and move forward with our second event in the series, featuring our wonderful alum, Ebun, who's going to introduce herself in just a second. But one last point before we jump in is if you have any questions throughout the presentation today, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Both Aaliyah and I are going to be monitoring the chat and keep track of all the questions that you have. And about 20 minutes or so before the end of our time together today, we're going to open up the floor for anybody to ask questions of Ebun based on anything that has been shared throughout the day. So without further ado, I would love to get us started with our presentation today by turning the mic over to Ebun to give us a little bit of an introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for the opportunity. I'm excited to be here and the opportunity to talk to you all today about my career journey. My name is Ebun Ojekunle, and I currently work as an analytical scientist at Pfizer in drug safety research and development. I started my journey growing up in Nigeria, and it was in Nigeria that my love for STEM and my interest in STEM developed. I moved to the US at 15, finished high school here, went on to college to study chemistry. While I was in a small liberal arts school, I was very interested in doing undergraduate research. And because it was a smaller school, there was limited opportunity to do that. So I decided to transfer to UConn. I started in UConn and completed my chemistry degree in 2 years. And while at UConn, I also got the opportunity to do undergraduate research for 2 years. After college, I started my first job at Cardinal Health. And in that role, I did manufacturing quality control of radiopharmaceutical products. And Cardinal Health is a health service company. So in that role, I was able to also do quality assurance work. And I worked there for about 3.5 years. Around the 3-year mark, I was looking for opportunity to grow and advance in my career. And I moved to Pfizer, where I currently work as a senior associate scientist in drug safety research and development. And in my current role, I support preclinical developmental studies for some of our therapies, and I've been doing that work for almost 2 years now, and it's been a great journey so far.
Awesome. Thank you so much for getting us started by sharing a little about your career journey. I know that you've been very busy lately working at Pfizer and with the pandemic and everything that's going on. So thank you for all the work that you've been doing to support the science behind the health efforts that have been in place at the moment. But I know also that the theme of our conversation today that came from some of the past conversations that we've had is around the topic of advocating for yourself and how that's really essential in career growth and development. So my question to you is, why did you choose that as the focus of today's conversation? Why do you think that's so important?
When I first got the opportunity to do this, I thought really hard about what I think would be beneficial to most students. And in my career so far, college and professional, one of the pivotal moments of my journey have been times where I advocated for myself. And advocating for myself in my career has taken different shapes and forms, from negotiating a job offer or asking for an opportunity to learn a new skill, to learn a new technique, to grow and develop my technical skills, also learning the opportunity to be a part of a team, to lead a team, to work on a project, and also just connecting with people outside my immediate networks to gain a career perspective or ask for assistance as I grow and advance in my career. And for me, I think that the events around George Floyd last summer also made me do some introspection, and that introspection led me into thinking about how, in order to grow as a young Black woman and advance in a career, especially in STEM, it is very important to be able to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for that perspective. Like you said, advocating can take many different shapes and forms depending on what's going on in your own personal career journey, what's going on in the world, and how those, in particular, how those things might intersect. And it sounds like you've had many opportunities to advocate for yourself, whether they be positive or negative over the past couple of years. And going off of that, because advocating for yourself can look so many different ways, can you share, maybe pick one of the times that you did advocate for yourself and tell us that story so that we can sort of understand kind of what that process was like for you and how it impacted you as a professional?
Of course. One of the examples that actually come to mind was when I first transferred to UConn. I was, as I had mentioned before, I was really looking for an opportunity to do undergraduate research. And my first month here, I just went on the UConn chemistry website. I looked through some of the research work that the professors were doing and kind of read about things that align with my interests and the kind of projects that I was drawn to. After doing that, I emailed most of the professors, and I was able to hear back from two of them. When I met with them, one of them told me that there was no opportunity to do undergraduate research that semester, but if I was patient, I would get the opportunity. I may get the opportunity the following semester. The other professor was actually new at UConn at the time, and he had a meeting with me. We talked about what I was interested in. I didn't have any experience with research, but I had experience in the lab, just doing lab work. And he offered me the opportunity to do research work, and I was able to actually do research in his lab for about 2 years. That professor is actually Alfredo Angelis Boza, and it was a pleasure to work with him, and he's been a great support in my career so far since then. Another opportunity that I was able to advocate for myself was actually when I got my first job offer after college. At the time, I received a call from the HR personnel, and they offered me the job. I mentioned that I was excited. It was an incredible opportunity. I, however, decided to counter the offer after she told me my financial compensation. When I told her that I would like more money, she was actually receptive to that. And she told me that she was gonna go back to the hiring manager to ask if that was something they were willing to do. She called me back a few hours on the same day to inform me that the hiring manager accepted my counter offer. And I was excited because while I was a little bit nervous to do that, I went for it and it was a success.
I'm so glad that that was a success for you. As someone who has also negotiated salary in my past experiences, I can attest to how nerve-wracking that is, and I'm glad that you still went forward with it anyway, and were able to have that positive outcome to share. Going off of that, though, you know, I know that advocating for yourself is sometimes very difficult. Were there any times where you tried to advocate for yourself that maybe didn't go quite as planned or didn't have such a positive outcome? And if so, what did you maybe learn or take away from those experiences?
Of course, I do think that one of the things that I've learned over the course of time in my career is also when you advocate for yourself, the answer could come in different forms. It could be a yes, it could be a no, it could be a maybe, it could be not right now. And I would say that when you get those answers, it is important to take a minute to, you know, analyze the situation and ask yourself what made you get the response that you got. You can also just talk to your support network, your mentors, your friends to kind of get their own advice and outlook on the reason for the response. And I think that in the course of my career, when you are a little bit nervous about advocating for yourself, there are so many resources online that I have found could help to manage those anxiety. And while it could be nerve-wracking, like you mentioned, it is important to still be comfortable in trying to do that, in trying to go for it, because the more you do that, the more you're gonna get comfortable with advocating for yourself. I also believe that it is important to use social media as your network, whether it's reaching out to alumni or reaching out to people in the industry to ask for help in navigating the career space or helping you interview for a job. In my experience, people are usually happy and willing to give students assistance in whatever they need help with. And at the end of the day, I think that especially as minority students, it is easier to learn to advocate for yourself when the stakes are low than when the stakes are higher.
Awesome. I really like what you said earlier about how when you're advocating for yourself, the answer could come in many different forms. It could be a yes, a no, a maybe, and I think that is really important because those are all very different answers, and maybe there's even more things on that list, but that truly does determine maybe where or what your next steps are based on what the answer is and why that answer was given to you. I think that's fantastic advice. But I also wanted to follow up on the advice that you just gave about addressing the nerves that come with advocating for yourself. So like we've talked about, I think that a lot of students, or especially like earlier career professionals, can be nervous about advocating for themselves, especially when they feel like they don't have a lot of experience to base that advocacy off of. So I know that you mentioned like social media and your network and mentors as good resources, but how do you recommend using those resources to address the nerves that come with advocating for yourself?
So one of the things that I have done is whether it's reaching out to mentors online, you practice. Practicing could take the form of just writing an email. Maybe you'd be maybe you're not gonna follow through with it the first time, but you read it all over again, you take a look at it, you may even ask friends, colleagues to take a look at it, and also understanding that, yes, there is a very high chance that they don't respond to you, but I think that could be for different reasons. It is important to not let the fear of rejection prevent us from, taking a very important step in our career. When I was talking about negotiating my first offer, I practiced over and over again. I was still nervous when I said it on the phone, but I didn't let that deter me from asking for it, because there are gonna be moments where it just takes just saying something, asking for that opportunity that separates you from the next step in your career. And I also think in reaching out to alumni, in my experience again, people are generally responsive, and we also need to be flexible and understand that, yes, people are busy, but we are less likely to get a response back when we don't write anything. If you don't ask for it, then the answer is definitely no. But if you ask for it, then the answer is a yes or a maybe.
That is a fantastic point. You're absolutely right that if we don't ask for it, we'll never know what the outcome could be. And I also agree with you that practice is key, and practice can take many different forms, but the more you practice, just like with anything, the more comfortable you become with it over time. So I think that's fantastic advice as well. And I did want to ask you more specifically, I know that you have a mentor or a couple of mentors that you personally work with, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about what your relationship with your mentor has been like, maybe even how you started that relationship, and what advice you would have for maybe students on the call who are looking for mentors.
Of course. So in the course of my career, I've never really had a mentor until recently. I mean, I've had people I've gone to for advice, people I've gone to for questions, people I've gone to ask or listen to what they have to say about maybe taking the next steps. But it wasn't until about a year ago that I randomly connected with someone on LinkedIn. I don't even think I was looking for a mentor at the time. It was kind of like a background. Okay, yes, I'm at the point in my career where I should focus on that, but I wasn't actively searching for it. So I connected with my mentor, who wasn't my mentor at the time, on LinkedIn. And I just went through her profile and I was very impressed by what I saw. So I sent her like a quick LinkedIn message about how I like what she was doing, the work she was doing. I was impressed by it. I think, especially as a young Black woman in STEM, like she's doing amazing things. She wrote back to me and we kind of sort of connected on being both UConn alums, and also she had worked at Pfizer many years ago before I started. So we were able to use both factors to connect, and I didn't see anything, and I just followed her work, whether it's listening to her podcast and just reading her articles. But it wasn't until a few weeks later where I messaged her and I told her that I would like to connect and talk to her about her career journey. She accepted and we had a meeting. I listened to what she had to say. I had questions prepared. I asked her some of those questions. And at the end, I told her that I understand that, at least in my experience, that people are a little bit less committed to a long-term mentorship, but that would be my ask. I would like her to be my mentor, and she accepted. And that was how we started a mentorship relationship. And over the course of the past months that we've connected, she's been able to be a great resource to me, whether it's supporting my career journey, me asking her for work career perspective, or asking for thinking of the next steps in my career journey, connecting me with other people who have the resources or ability to answer some of my questions. And I think it's also important to understand that usually mentorship shouldn't be a one-way street. While she's able to be a great resource to me and provide this support, I've also been able to just follow her work, support in my own little way by commenting and reading the articles that she writes and liking and, appreciating and just following the work that she's been doing in the STEM area.
That's great. Thank you for sharing such a detailed sort of story about how you formed that mentoring relationship, because I think it's really helpful to hear what those initial steps might look like until you reach that more formal mentorship capacity. And you actually kind of read my mind, because I was going to ask you about kind of the mutually beneficial components of mentorship, which I think is something that we don't talk about a lot. Again, going back to what we were talking about earlier about how sometimes early career professionals don't feel like they have a lot to add or a lot of value to offer. So is there anything that you would add in terms of, like, besides, it sounds like your mentor is someone who is often like publishing articles or work that you can comment on and read. Are there any other ways that you've added value to that mentoring relationship, or that you think other students could add value to their mentors?
Of course, I think that even just asking in general, especially with COVID, about how they're doing, about family, about loved ones, is a great way to connect and kind of give in your own little way. I think it's also very important to be flexible with this relationship. Usually people that, in my opinion, people seek mentorship from are busy people as well. So the ability to be flexible with time and just perspectives about how you need to walk around their own schedule, in my opinion, would help navigate that relationship well.
Got it. Yeah. I think for sure bringing in the personal elements of the relationship makes a lot of sense, especially given everything that we've all been through this past year. I think that's fantastic advice. Awesome. So I want to, shift gears a little bit into another, concern or hesitation that comes up when thinking about advocating for yourself, which is the idea that in order to advocate for yourself, you need to know what your long-term career goals are. And I want to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that that's true? Do you think that that's not true? Maybe in the middle? And any other thoughts that you would have to share on that topic?
I don't think that you need to know what your long-term goals are, especially for students. However, I think that you need to have an understanding of what you're looking for or you looking to get out of your career. So this could be just knowing maybe the next few steps, or more like a short-term goal. When I was a student, I didn't know my long-term goal. And I think that telling students that they need to know their long-term goals could be overwhelming or debilitating to them. I think it is also important to be flexible while thinking about our career goals. I mean, if someone had told many of us that we would be working remotely many years ago, we would not have believed it. I mean, I'm a scientist, and even now I work from home sometimes during the week. And I think COVID-19 has kind of shifted our perspectives about the way that we think about work, the way we think about our career professions. And I think having the flexibility in our career journeys and not necessarily thinking that we need to know where we want to be 15 years from now would help us take advantage of many of the opportunities that we have that are open to us over the course of our career. I also think that the more we gain more experience, the more we have an understanding about our career goals long term. I have a better understanding of my long-term career goal now because I have more experience in the industry than I did, say, 5 years ago or 6 years ago.
Yeah, that's another great point. I think flexibility is definitely key. And I absolutely agree with you that if you told me 2 years ago I'd be working remotely, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are. And you're absolutely right that things change and we need to change with them. And sometimes being able to advocate for yourself is a really good skill for change management, because if your circumstances change, but maybe your employer's circumstances are not changing with you, that's an opportunity maybe where an advocacy, advocating for yourself might be really beneficial in that sort of scenario. So I think once again, I think that's really, really great advice. And a question that I have off of that is, when advocating for yourself, how specific do you think should your ask be? Like I think when it comes to negotiating, there's some clear guidelines. Like if you're negotiating a salary, I think it's pretty clear that you want to talk about numbers and salary expectations. But earlier you also shared that you've also advocated for like learning a new skill or another sort of career opportunity. So how have you decided in those circumstances, like how specific to make your ask?
That's a really good question. So I think that, at least I'm thinking back to moments where I've, advocated for myself. And an example that comes to mind was when I was at my previous job and an opportunity for a new project had come up at my company at the time. So I remember my boss at the time actually didn't want to give me the opportunity to learn that new skill or to develop the skill that I already had. And when I felt like I was in the position to kind of like grow and advance in my career. And I went to him with that specific ask. I feel like I am in the best position to learn this skill and learn this technique. And I also gave him the reason why I think is efficient, because it gives junior staff or other people to develop other areas in the lab. And at first he was a little bit taken back, but I had notes to explain to him why I think I was the I don't want to say perfect person, but the more likely person to also hasten the training process. He eventually accepted. And to go back to your question, I think that it is important for us to know what we're asking for. The only thing I would say is that sometimes when we get a response, it may not be for the perfect yes that we would want. For example, if I go to my manager to say, I want an opportunity to lead a team, and if she feels like I need more years of experience, she may say that, okay, instead of leading a team, I'm gonna give you the opportunity to co-lead a team. And while that's not exactly the perfect years that I was expecting, that is still a good opportunity to have the experience that I was seeking. So in that way, I think we can be very specific. I the important thing is while we are specific in our ask, we may not necessarily get the specific answer that we're looking for.
Got it. I think that makes sense. And I think that ties back to your thoughts earlier about being flexible and knowing that, you know, even if you have a certain vision in mind, it might not play out that way, but there still could be a lot of benefits from that scenario and still things that you learn for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but one thing you did mention in that story, again, thank you for another great story and a great example, is you went to that conversation with like notes and you were very prepared with key talking points about the specific ask. Do you have any advice for our students about how to prepare for conversations like that? Like what should they include in their notes and what should they really be thinking about in advance?
Of course, I think that for students, it goes back to what I said about having an understanding of what you want out of your career goals. And I think, I mean, this is personal to everyone, but you also need to have an understanding if you're ready to ask for something, why you think the opportunity would be beneficial to you and not only you, but to the person you're asking from. It's like looking at it, like what's the benefit to them, what's in it for them, what kind of impact are you gonna make with that ask? This could be asking for a project, asking for a job, negotiating a job offer. If you're negotiating a job offer, you need to come with a value added ask. Why do you think you deserve that extra money instead of taking the first offer? And I think that for students, it takes practice. And again, it also takes just asking for a different perspective, asking other people what they think. I think getting feedback from friends, senior colleagues, or even senior students would give you the confidence that you need to go into that meeting and not waver at your request and be able to speak in-depthly about the value you would be bringing to whatever ask that you're bringing into the meeting.
Yeah, those are all good things to think about when preparing for these sorts of conversations. I think value add was kind of the key there for me. Like truly, what are you bringing to this scenario that we wouldn't have without you? And I think that's one of our biggest selling points as individuals who have our own best interests in mind. So thank you for going through that. I think we have 2 more questions prepared for you before we're going to start taking questions from the audience. We've gotten a bunch of great ones via private messages so far, but another question that we wanted to know your thoughts on are there any times that you would recommend not advocating for yourself or kind of taking a step back? For example, like, you know, if there's a time where you think you might get fired or reprimanded or your reporting structure doesn't allow for it or anything like that, or are you pro advocating all the time?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again? I think
yeah, absolutely. So I was just asking are there any times do you think that that it's a better decision to not advocate for yourself? Like if there's a chance of being fired or reprimanded or your reporting structure doesn't allow for it, or do you think that, you know, no matter what, it's always appropriate to advocate for yourself?
That is an interesting question. I don't think there should ever be a reason why you shouldn't advocate for yourself. I think sometimes it's more about the delivery than the ask itself. I think that we shouldn't let the fear of being reprimanded to prevent us from, you know, asking for what we want. But again, there are different ways to ask. Even if you think that you deserve the opportunity you are asking for, if you go into it with the perspective of I absolutely deserve it, and you don't come with a few talking points of why you think you deserve it, then you may not get reprimanded then, but the answer may be absolutely no. So I think that I can't think of any situation or reason why you shouldn't advocate for yourself. And regardless of whatever as long as it's not, I can't, I'm trying to think of what would be a no to ask, and it's just not coming to me, because I think that if you're in a space where you're thinking about advocating for yourself about certain things, that's something that you believe is important. And you just have to find a way to bring it to the other person, whether it's your manager, whether it's in an academic space, whether it's your professor or whether it's your PI. I think it's all about the way you bring the request than not asking at all.
Absolutely. That's a really good way to put it. I definitely agree that the delivery and the timing and the really like knowing your audience and knowing the scenario is very important. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and I agree with you. It's kind of tough to think about a time where like it's absolutely a no to advocate for yourself, because we are our own best advocates. So I think that makes a lot of sense. All right. So I think again, my last question before we move into Q&A is considering you've had a couple of years in your current position as well as your previous position, I'm curious if you've noticed anything in terms of advocating that your colleagues or your coworkers have done that has maybe influenced the way that you have approached advocating for yourself, and especially if like identity comes into play. Like I know you mentioned a couple of times as a Black woman in STEM, you've approached maybe things a little bit differently. So any thoughts about that kind of like workplace dynamics and how that impacts your approach to advocacy?
In my experience, I said I've had, a couple of people that I've gone to for advice in my career, even before I had a mentor. And I think for me, before I go into a meeting to ask for something or advocate for myself, I try to get various perspectives. That perspective means from a diverse audience. So it's not, instead of just asking from a senior colleague who is a white woman, I may also ask from a senior colleague who is a Black woman or Black man, and so on and so forth. I think it's important to take into account these various perspectives because it prevents us from going to a meeting blind. Of course, I'm not saying that every single person is gonna think the same way. I'm not saying people in that subset are monolith, but I think just having different perspective brings a new perspective to us before going into a meeting. One of the times that I remember being in this situation was at my last job. I was given an opportunity at a different department to take a new role. And I remember the hiring manager of that department encouraged me to apply because he thought I was a shoo-in for the role. I was excited about it because it was an opportunity to grow and advance in my career. And when I applied for it, I indeed got the role, but it was time to, negotiate. And the HR personnel came to me with an offer that I felt like wasn't reflective of the value and the experience that I was going to bring to the role. So I kind of just, asked senior colleagues what their thoughts were. And based on the people I asked, everyone kind of mirrored my opinion, but they told me to go into the meeting with different perspectives. Some people said I should go into the meeting saying that my cost of living has increased as a way to get more money, while some people said I should go into the meeting just explaining the value that I was bringing. So I had these two different voices in my head and my own voices, or not even two, multiple voices. I decided to go into the meeting explaining the value that I was bringing. And the HR personnel brought it to the hiring manager. Of course, the hiring manager didn't accept the offer, but that moment, it was still interesting to get various perspectives of people and not just my own perspective. And I think that is important to have sometimes before going into whatever meeting to advocate for ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great, I think, closing point to this portion of our event today. I absolutely agree with you that having different perspectives is helpful, especially because if you're advocating for yourself to someone you've never met before, you have no idea what their reaction or what their response is going to be. So the more perspective you can get in advance, I think the more, ideally, the more prepared you'll be for whatever that person says or does in response. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, another fantastic piece of advice. So at this point, I'd like to move into our audience Q&A. And just as a reminder, if anybody has questions that they haven't already submitted, please go ahead and do that in the chat. Aaliyah's been great at monitoring those. And our first question for you is, it sounds like you've been so good at advocating for yourself since you were an undergrad. How and where did you first develop that skill?
That is a good question. Honestly, I think just having conversations with people, even as an undergrad, talking to senior students, talking to people who are already in their careers, and just perspective from, other people, especially minorities, Black people, professionals, and their experience in the industry. And I think over the course of time, I learned to do these things, even if I was afraid to do them, or if I was nervous, or like you said, if I was intimidated. And I think over time, some things have become less intimidating to ask for. Like I remember the first time when I said negotiated a job offer, it was the hardest thing, or one of the hardest things I had ever done. But over time, it became less intimidating, and it's almost like a general conversation when I get a job offer to do now. So I think even as students or young professionals, like I mentioned before, at first, you're gonna be intimidated by these things, but I think the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Circling back to that advice of practicing from earlier, which I think still rings through. And I would agree that you sound like you're so good at advocating for yourself. So I think a lot of us are envious of that skill and that ability.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So our next question is about mentors. And this question is, what should I look for in a mentor? Do they have to be a senior level or like upper level professional?
That is another good question. I think, okay, so for me, when I was looking for mentors, it was, again, before I met my mentor, I didn't have like a checklist of what I was looking for. I saw her profile, I went through it, and I liked where she was or where she is in her career. And I decided that she was going to be my mentor based on that information. But to answer your question, I think it depends on what you're looking for exactly. What do you want to be mentored in? Are you looking for career advice, or are you looking for an opportunity in a certain industry? If you're looking for an opportunity in the pharmaceutical industry, then it would be important to seek a mentor from that industry. If you're looking to go into the academic space, then it's probably necessary to seek a mentor in that space. I'm trying to think about the one about, does it have to be a senior colleague? I think it depends on how you define senior. For some people who are looking to transition, for example, I know people who have transitioned from one business function to another in their chosen industry. And usually they don't necessarily think for someone significantly senior to them. I think in that instance, they're looking to gain more experience in a different function. So they look for someone who is doing what they would like to do. So to answer your question, if you're looking for a mentor, I would think that you want to learn something from them. If you're thinking that it has to be, I don't know, a vice president or CEO of a company, no, absolutely not. It doesn't have to be like that. But I think it is relevant to seek someone who is a little bit higher than where you currently are. This could also be a student. A senior student could mentor you if you're a freshman, or someone who is just early on in their career could mentor you if you're a student, and so on.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was a great way to describe how it kind of depends on what your goals are for that mentorship relationship, and the right person could have many different characteristics aside from just being like a senior level colleague. So I think that was a great explanation. Our next question is, do you find it easier to connect with people who have similar identities as you? For example, being a woman or being a Black woman?
Not necessarily. I remember I was at a conference last year in Boston, and I was staying at a hotel, and I was just, was busy that night. I think it was like Valentine's Day weekend. So it was busy, super busy at the hotel that night, and we're just standing in line. I think I was eventually unable to get a place to sit, and I was offered a place at the bar to eat. So I went to the bar and I saw this white woman sitting at the bar too. So it was just the two of us at the bar, and I automatically struck a conversation with her. She was in Boston to, I believe, do a training in the pharmaceutical industry as well. And we just kind of talked about our experience and just have conversations about careers, about personal lives. So to answer your question, I personally do not necessarily find it easier to connect with people like me. I've connected with, white women, Black men, white men, and Asian men, or people that look different from what I look like. I don't think we need to focus on identity to connect with people. I think sometimes when we find people that look like us, we generally navigate towards them, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's our physical identity that makes us find a common ground. If I'm looking for an opportunity in, for example, sales, and I meet a white woman who is in sales, and I meet a Black woman who he's a scientist. If I'm looking for an opportunity in sales, I do not necessarily think that the Black woman is going to help me in sales, because that's not her area of expertise. So I think that while it is comfortable for us to connect with people that may look like us, I have had relationships with people that don't necessarily look like me. My PI when I was at UConn is Peruvian. And I mean, I hadn't met someone from Peru before I met him. And I was still able to learn and have a relationship with him even up till now.
Great, thank you for sharing that advice. I think one of the points that you made there that really stood out to me is how it may be comfortable for us to form mentoring or professional relationships with people who do look like us or who do share our identities, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those are always going to be the most beneficial professionally, or depending on what our goals are necessarily. So I think that that's really good advice of, trying to balance like your comfort level with your professional goals and making sure that your relationships are helping with both of those things, because they are both important. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we're going to have time for maybe about 3 more questions. So if you haven't gotten yours in yet and you really want to get it in, definitely go ahead and do that. But our next question is, how do I determine my value as an entry-level professional? I don't feel like I have enough experience to explain how I add value yet.
That is a really good question. I think as students, what are your, yes, you may not have industry experience, but what are the activities that you're doing on campus? What are your leadership experience, opportunity to lead an affinity group or an organization? Maybe it's opportunity to be a resident assistant or peer mentor to students, or opportunity to, like I mentioned before, do undergraduate research. These are things that reflect that you are more than academics. And a lot of companies, in my opinion, are starting to look for employees who can enjoy their time at work, who can have, connect with other individuals at work. And I think the way you can show that is by having life outside of your core academic endeavors. These are, whether it's sports that you're interested in, whether it's cultural organizations, those are the things that show the value that you're bringing as someone without any industry experience. Also, take advantage of maybe summer internships or even just summer jobs. Having summer jobs or having even part-time work on campus will show that you're someone with a good work ethic. And I think those are some of the things that employers would think are valuable into someone that they want to bring into their company.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it really comes down to marketing what you do have, and not necessarily dismissing, student organizations or part-time jobs as not industry experience, because they're definitely still relevant and they definitely still bring transferable skills and transferable experience that would absolutely be relevant for employers to hear about. And I also really like your point about how companies are starting to look for more employees that will enjoy their work and will not only be productive, but also happy at their company. And I think that's a fantastic point as well. And we're even seeing more like company sports teams and stuff like that popping up that really is in alignment with that observation. So that's definitely a great point.
I mean, I know at Pfizer, they have like several affinity groups. They have intramural sports, soccer, volleyball for employees who are interested in things like that, an opportunity to just connect with other individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like fun.
It is.
All right, so our next question is, how do you continue to grow in your current position if you're happy with where you are now and maybe not looking to make a transition or find a new position?
I think that growing in your career doesn't necessarily mean switching jobs. I think that if you've been at your whatever industry or company you've been for many years, there are still ways to expand your experience and your skills. And this could take the form of asking for an opportunity to be on a cross-departmental project, maybe asking to work in a different department to learn something new, or even just asking for raising your hand to lead an affinity group. Like I mentioned before, some of many companies are starting to have affinity groups based on interests or identities for employees. And I think that you can grow within your current role if you're looking for opportunities to do that. You can also just look for opportunities outside, volunteer in your neighborhood, volunteer in your community, maybe asking for opportunity to, I don't know, fundraise for an event, or in your community, opportunity to lead someone, mentor people. You don't necessarily need to leave your company. Like you said, if you like where you are, there's nothing wrong with, just looking outside of your current role for opportunity to advance and grow. Also, you can just have a conversation with your manager to let them know that, okay, maybe I'm interested in learning about project management because I want to improve my project management skill. If that's an opportunity that a manager feels is useful, then it's gonna be a yes. And that would be an opportunity to learn something new, even while still in your current role or your current company. You can also even look for opportunities within the company as a way to grow and advance in your career.
I think that's such a good way to come kind of full circle on today's conversation, because I think one of the first points that you made is advocating for yourself can look so many different ways. And your answer to this question was that, or advancing in your career doesn't necessarily mean changing jobs. It can mean small changes or small developmental opportunities. And I think that that's a great theme and a really good sort of final message to leave on. And with that, the last question that we have here for you today is, if we want to stay in touch with you, are you open to that? And how can we stay in touch with you?
Of course. I'm on LinkedIn, like I've mentioned. If you search for my name, Ebun Ojekunle on LinkedIn, I'm happy to answer any question and give any guidance that I can give. And feel free to connect with me and reach out to me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your willingness to let us all connect with you. I hope that the students on the call take advantage of that, because you have an alum who's right here in front of you, who's willing and interested in supporting you and giving back. So make sure you copy down that link and take that opportunity, take Ebun up on that opportunity if you're interested in maybe having some career conversations. But that brings us to the end of our questions. It's just about 4 o'clock. So I wanted to say thank you so, I know it went by so fast. But thank you so much for joining us today, Ebun, and your fantastic advice about advocating for yourself, and for sharing your own stories about advocating for yourself as well. I think it was very relatable, and I think we have a lot of takeaways from your conversation that we will all keep in mind, hopefully, as we continue on all of our career journeys. Just before we exit our event today, I do just want to mention again that this event was part of a larger series. So if you enjoyed today's event, we do have 3 more coming up, and Aaliyah just put the link in the chat for you to go ahead and register for those other sessions. And one other link that we put in the chat for you is our link to our Husky Mentor Network, which is a website very similar to LinkedIn, but that's specific to UConn alumni. So if you're going to take up the advice that you got today about finding an alum and using that as a common factor to connect with them and maybe ask them to be your mentor, the Husky Mentor Network is a great place for you to go ahead and do that. So one last thank you to you, Ebun, for some amazing advice today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope that you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your summer, and we are looking forward to reconnecting with you in the fall.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. It's been a pleasure talking about my experience. And yeah, it went by so fast.
It certainly did. All right, you're getting lots of thank you shout outs in the chat.
Thank you.